30 years ago, we found a new way to use beautiful sailboats. You know, 100 years ago, the average person said, well, I guess 100 years from now, sailboats will only be known in the page of a book or a picture on the wall. Steam has taken over. They counted without rich people who said, oh, these beautiful yachts, they may be expensive, but I'll get one. And they kept racing them. The America's Cup races just kept on going. They counted without admirals of navies who said, you can learn about wind and wave better in a sailboat than you can in a motorboat. Let's at least have one square rigger in our Navy for cadets to train on. And not only in Europe, but in Argentina and other parts of the world, big square riggers kept sailing right through the 20th century. But in 1970, a new way to use beautiful sailboats was discovered. They can become floating classrooms, and young people can learn things that somehow they don't learn. It's a glimpse into the past as well as looking into the future. After 3 hours on the Clearwater, 50 kids have gotten a little introduction to marine biology. They've looked through a microscope. Hey, what's those wiggly things? And the crew member who's teaching them says that's called plankton. Plankton is for fish what grass is for cows. If there were no plankton in the river, you wouldn't find any fish. They get a little whiff of history, a little bit of sailing. And when they go back to their class, I think some of them have had their lives changed. It worked out so well here on the Hudson that pretty soon there were schooners in Chesapeake Bay and Long Island Sound doing the same thing. They sent their staff members to sail on the Clearwater and learn how we teach. We didn't learn right away, you know. The first time we tried to teach kids, it was right here at Beacon. A biologist stood on the cabin roof and said, now, kids, I'm going to tell you something about the river. But 15 minutes later, he was hoarse, and the kids weren't listening anyway. They were looking at this extraordinary boat. They were looking at the view. Now, as you know, a bus pulls up, 50 kids pile out. They're immediately split up into 5 groups. One group goes to the starboard, and they're taught how to put a net in the water. They catch some fish, sometimes small, sometimes big. 10 of them go to the port side and put a very fine mesh net in, as fine as a lady's stocking. And it comes up with some green slime. And that's what they put under the microscope to look at. 10 of them go to the tiller. The captain says, push that big stick to starboard. That means that way. Now push it to port. Now hold it amidships. And the kid said, we're steering the boat. 10 of them go below and learn to read charts and see how by use of the Coast Guard charts, they can see whether the water is deep or shallow, or whether it's sand or mud or rocks down there. So it's a floating classroom. Admittedly, we had some big arguments in the beginning. There was a scientist trying to raise money for a research boat on Long Island Sound. He said, what do you need a sailboat for? You need a research boat with a laboratory. Poor man, he never got the funding for his research boat. But Clearwater has kept sailing now 30 years, partly with money from members. We have 5,000 or 10,000 members, each paying a few dollars a year to support the organization. We get a little money by running festivals. As you know, our big Clearwater revival will have 10 or 20,000 people there. Sometimes it doesn't make much money, there's rain, but sometimes we'll make $50,000 or $100,000, which is very much needed. We're now slowly trying to learn to live within our means. I don't know if you realize that I'm a fiscal conservative all my life. I want to get the money in hand and then I spend it. I don't want to spend it and then find myself in debt and have to beg, please loan me some money so I can pay off my debts. There are now at least a dozen other boats, mostly in this country, but some overseas. Last year, Greenpeace in Amsterdam took a huge catch-out called the Albatross and did just as Clearwater does, teaching Dutch school kids about the ocean and ocean's problems. But most fascinating is you don't have to have a big boat. Out in Tacoma, Washington, a woman whose son was working in the Maine apprentice shop. It's a shop where young people, men and women, learn how to build wooden boats. And they built a beautiful big, if you can imagine a rowboat 38 feet long. It is beautiful, just as beautiful as the Clearwater, I have to admit. And it's called a bantry because it was found in Bantry Bay, Ireland. 200 years ago, a French admiral sent his gig ashore and it got captured. He never got it back. It now sits in the Dublin Marine Museum. And now the apprentice shop is having people all around the world build bantries like it. And out in Tacoma, Washington, the mother of one of the apprentices says, send me a copy of the plans. She took them to a local boat builder in Tacoma, Washington. He said, oh yes, I can build this for $20,000 or $30,000. She said, I don't want you to build it. I want you to teach us how to build it. Took him 2 years. And she wrote me a long letter. Be careful, don't do this, you must do that. We made a lot of mistakes, she said, but we have our boat now. And guess what's happened? We get a telephone call from a group. We are the citizens for a safe bay. Can we use your boat? She says, absolutely, we'd love to have you use it, but you must train 13 people. A bow watch, 10 oars, one of them 18 feet long, a navigator and a coxswain to steer, make sure it goes straight, and you can use our boat. So now, out in Tacoma Bay, this 38-foot rowboat, this beautiful 38-foot rowboat with 10 long oars, is out taking the mayor out, taking the head of the Chamber of Commerce out, taking the president of the graduating classes at the high schools. They're saving Tacoma Bay with this bantry. They're going to be at Ships to Save the Water. If they can't bring their boat, at least they'll have somebody there. Because we want to show people all around the world that if they use boats and science and singing probably too, maybe good food too, all these things together can help give young people a way to participate in saving the future of the world. I confess I learned how to read when I was very young, and I read that H.G. Wells had said, the human race faces two possibilities, education or catastrophe. Which will take place? It's a race between education and catastrophe. A few years later, I got into nature. I read every book by a man named Ernest Thompson Seton. He wrote books like Wild Animals I Have Known and Camping and Woodcraft. He also said, don't look to Greece or Rome or to the age of chivalry for role models. Right here were people who were brave and strong and shared everything they had. They were revengeful. That was a weak point. But he was talking about the Native Americans. And at age 10, I built myself a teepee, went around with a feather in a band around my head. And from Seton, I learned how to cook over a tiny little fire inside my teepee. Then, as a teenager, I read Henry Thoreau, and this took me a step beyond, into the modern age. Isn't it extraordinary that this man, who was not widely read during his lifetime, he was only 44 when he got TB and died. His first book sold only a few hundred copies, and the printer said, "Please, won't you take the rest of these off my hands?" Thoreau said, "Think of it, I have a library of 1,000 books now, all written by me." Well, of course, Thoreau becomes even more important to every new generation. Not that he doesn't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. And probably the most important thing we all can learn is the limits on our own knowledge. My guess is this is a good thing. When Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were old men, they wrote letters to each other. When they were young, they'd worked closely. The Declaration of Independence. 20 years later, they were political opponents. Adams narrowly got elected president. 4 years later, Jefferson overwhelmingly got elected president. But now they were both out of office, and a friend got them corresponding. And they found themselves each a little pessimistic, saying, how can one have prosperity without commerce? How can one have commerce without luxury? How can one have luxury without corruption? How can one have corruption without the end of the Republic? Well, we're still tangling with that question, aren't we? Here's another similar question we have to tangle with. How can one have a technological society without doing research? How can you research without research into dangerous areas? How can you research dangerous areas without discovering very dangerous things? How can you discover very dangerous things without them falling into the hands of insane or power-hungry people? We don't know the answer, but we do know there's got to be an answer. I think Clearwater will be a part of it. And the Ernestina up in New Bedford, the great schooner which was last sailed bringing immigrants from Cape Verde Islands to New Bedford, they're part of it. And the A.J. Meerwald, an old oyster dredging schooner, is a part of it. You know, that boat was bought back by a young woman. She was only 22 when she heard about the Clearwater. She came up and took a sail. She went back full of enthusiasm and got some friends together. They said, what do you think we should do? She said, don't you know that old wreck that's rotting away, the A.J. Meerwald? It used to dredge for oysters. Then it was motorized. Then it was just allowed to rot away. But maybe it can be fixed up. Well, she brought them all up to sail on the Clearwater, and they all went back full of enthusiasm. They raised $5,000. They hauled the A.J. Meerwald out of the water, put it on land, built a plastic shed over it, and a little shed right next to it full of tools and carpentry equipment. Then they started trying to fix it up. Rotten wood, rotten wood, rotten wood, rotten wood. 6 years later, they were getting discouraged. But their perseverance paid off. The state of New Jersey gave them 2 big grants. $300,000 from the state education department. $300,000 from the state transportation department. Now they could afford to hire some people who knew what they were doing. 2 years later, the A.J. Meerwald was sailing on the Delaware Bay, just like Clearwater. All they could save was the keel and 2 ribs and the name, and maybe some of the hardware. hardware. Oh, they're very traditional. They don't have Dacron sails like Clearwater. They have canvas sails. And everything on the boat is just as it used to be 80 years ago when the boat was built. Except they point out something bright orange. Says, Coast Guard says we have to have this. It's an inflatable life raft.
That's a good thing.
Well, the Mirwald, the Ernestina, the Clearwater, and a whole lot of other boats are going to be there. And we'll compare notes. How do you raise the money? Where do you get the personnel? Where do you get the volunteers? And are the young kids you work with kindergarten? Do you work with high school? College? We'll find out the answer to all these questions on July 2nd. I've been using music for at least 60 or 70 years, knowing that music can be more than just entertainment. Of course, churches have known this for thousands of years. And my guess is that songwriters throughout the ages have snuck meanings into their songs which were not always popular. There's an old Arab proverb says, when the king puts the poet on his payroll, he cuts off the tongue of the poet. I think of that every time I get a job on TV. Plato is supposed to have said, it's very dangerous to allow the wrong kind of music in the Republic. And way back 60 years ago, Woody Guthrie, who wrote This Land Is Your Land, he and I were singing for unions. After World War II, Lee Hayes, and Ronnie Gilbert, and Fred Hellerman and I formed a little group called the Weavers. And we actually got started first because we wanted to sing for the peace movement. We hoped that USA would carry on the hopes of Franklin Roosevelt. United Nations, no more war. Well, we were not as successful as we hoped. On the other hand, I think music played a part in the fact that World War III did not take place. Music here, music in many places. And I've found out on the sloop Clearwater, of course, how there are many different kinds of songs. Not just old sea shanties, but fun songs of all kinds. My grandson notices the kids want some rock and roll. So he gets out his drum and he has them singing at the top of their lungs with him. Mary and the baby, oh yeah. I think we'll have some good singing at Ships to Save the Waters. There'll be a concert on Friday night with different kinds of music from young and old. My singing voice is gone, as you can tell. I tell people from here on down, I'm about 80% here. From here on up, I'm only about 20% here. Voice going, eyes going, ears going, brain, forget it. But if I can remember the words of a song, I'll give them to the audience. And pretty soon they're singing along with us. And if I do my job right, they may even sing in harmony. On the other hand, some of the best singers in the world have sung for Clearwater. And we're hoping that some of them will be there on Friday night. We're not quite sure who yet will be able to make it. One of them is a songwriter as well as a singer. He was a taxi driver in Yonkers when he wrote a song about the history of the Hudson River. Once the sachems told a story of a land the Great Spirit blessed, and the people followed the legend from the great waters in the west. And they came to a place where the fishing was good, the land it was fertile, game ran in the wood. And the chorus, everybody starts singing. I couldn't be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. I'm talking about Captain Rick Nestler, of course. He got sailing the Clearwater, and now he's captain of a big schooner up in Long Island Sound. He'll be there, and I hope he'll be singing Friday night. The steering committee for Ships to Save the Waters will be meeting, I believe, the first Saturday of every month between now and July. I can make some of the meetings, but not all of them. But there'll probably be lots of people who don't attend a single meeting, but they've been given a job. Maybe he says, make sure there's some finger food available all day for hungry people. You know, one of the solutions for the world is not just, it's better to, we've all got to learn, better to talk than shoot, right? But sometimes words fail and you have to use other things. Music helps, but food is even better. Yes, we'll use every means of communication. So there might be one committee just making sure, will people be fed right? And not too expensively. They don't have to go to these expensive New York restaurants where a hamburger costs $8.50. We're hoping that families will come and parents will bring children of all ages. Even though you can't learn everything in one day, just get started, you actually can board the ships. You know, most of op sail people, 1 million people will be standing on the shore, and all they can do is admire these beautiful boats as they sail grandly past. But the Ships to Save the Waters conference, they can actually go on board, they can turn the wheel or push the tiller, feel those big ropes. Some of the ropes are almost as thick as my wrist. And they raise these huge sails way, way, way up there. Look, there's somebody up there waving to us. It's going to be an exciting day for all ages. People ask me for advice because I'm 80 years old, and theoretically, I must have made a lot of mistakes, and didn't I learn from mistakes? I hope I've learned. I've made a lot of mistakes. And I tell them, don't lose your sense of humor. When you make a mistake, don't say, oh, I feel like killing myself. They know, I learned something I didn't know. And next thing you know, you're straightening up and trying going on a new tack. Try not to make too big mistakes. I was once at the helm of the Clearwater, and I didn't know that when you're near the shore, make sure the helm is on the shore side of the boat, so that if you get a puff of wind, it'll puff and turn you right into the middle of the river. But supposing the wind is coming from the shore, and the helm is away from the shore, the puff comes, and it's hard to straighten out. That boat's going to go right and hit the rocks. I came too near the shore, and the captain bawled me out. Lots of little things you learn. Hopefully you learn from every mistake, so later on in life you won't make too many big mistakes. What's the difference between education and experience? Education is when you learn to read the fine print. Experience is what you get when you don't read the fine print.
Picking up those books. Did you pick up those books on the corner?
Let's sing it. Once the sages told a story of a land the Great Spirit blessed, and the people followed the legend from the great waters in the west. And they came to a place where the fishing was good, a land that was fertile, game ran in the wood, and I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Sing it again. I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Next came the trappers, next the traders, their own fortune for to find. And the valley treated them kindly, and the farmers followed close behind. And the sloop sailed well laden round the battery, with flour from Yonkers, furs from Albany, and I could be happy, sing it, just spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Sing it again. I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Writers and painters told of its beauty on the waters and on the shore, while musicians sang its praises, keeping alive this old river's lore. Sun setting golden o'er the Palisades, with afternoon ending and daylight fades, and I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Once more, I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Maybe it's the moonlight, maybe it's the starlight reflected on old Haverstraw Bay. Maybe it's the fog rolling off of the highland at the break of a brand new day. But apple cider and pumpkins, strawberries and corn make the people of the river glad they were born. And I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. One more time. I could be happy spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Thank you all. I hope you sang out there.